That was an extraordinarily warm introduction. Thank you very much for your very warm reception, Dean. Each and every one of you. Actually, it's a great pleasure to join you today. It's a special day for you, but it's also a special day for me. So thanks for the invitation to hang with you today. I appreciate it. Dean Gilden, distinguished faculty, family and friends of the class of 2019, and most importantly, this year's graduating class of Penn State Dickinson School of Law. By the way, I recall when the dean was bragging about you a couple of years ago as the entering class. And there are two things that made him particularly, and the faculty particularly proud: the diversity and the quality of this entering class. By the way, he talked to me a little bit about the quality. I'm not sure I could have made the wait list, so I'm glad you got here. It is a tremendous honor and a privilege to be part of your celebration today. A celebration of Dickinson's 185-year story of scholarship and excellence, and of men and women, those before me now, who have conquered a rigorous curriculum, and you're now set to write a unique story and a future that's all your own to live and to write. Graduates, as alumni, you and I both know that the journey through law school is impossible without family and friends who support and guide us all along the way. I think the same can be said for the school's administrators and faculty, who ensure that your decision and my decision to attend Penn State Dickinson will mark as one of the best life choices you ever made. With that said, I want to take a few moments and take this public opportunity to thank Dean Gilden for his tireless, his visionary, and his effective leadership since he began his service, initially as interim dean in May of 2013. He has been resolute, patient, absolutely unflappable, and dedicated in leading our school through, in my judgment, may have been its most challenging period in the school's 185-year history. And over the recent years, Gary and the distinguished faculty of this extraordinary school have built upon our law school's already respected reputation with a culture, a vision, and a philosophy that I think distinguishes us and differentiates us in a very special manner from all other law schools. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to include your parents and family and friends. You have no idea how hard he has worked, obviously with great support from his faculty, but how hard he has personally worked for 6 years. And I think we need to thank him for his very distinguished and dedicated service. Thank you very much for joining me. You know better than most. Now, many of you already understand that the legal profession can come with its fair share of challenges. But if you're fortunate, and I want all of you to be fortunate, being a lawyer may be the most difficult, heart-wrenching, and dare I say, even perilous professional work of your life. Pretty excited about that, I can tell. And if that's the case, then it will also become the most adventurous, consequential, and fulfilling work as well. And that's what I'd like to talk with you and share some thoughts with you about this morning. Way back when, this is ancient history, 1972, I was sitting with my fellow graduates, Lillian. By the way, Lillian was only one of 3 or 4 women. It looks like you're running the school, ladies, but back then there were 3 or 4 women in our class, I think. We were at our own commencement ceremony. I didn't know at that time much about what was next for me. I didn't know much about myself, although I have to tell you, I learned a few things along the way as a former soldier and a newly minted law graduate. A scholarship had catapulted me to Harvard. Then a very polite but direct letter from President Nixon had sent me to several places down south to train, including a vacation spot called Fort Polk, Louisiana. There, my drill sergeant asked me one day, and I don't want to replicate his southern accent, but he said, "Ridge, I've been reading about you. Are you a Harvard boy?" I thought from that moment on, this conversation may not go very well. I said, "Yes, sir." "That's correct, sir." He said, "Ridge, if you're so smart, what are you doing here in an infantry company with a one-way ticket taking you to Southeast Asia?" I said, "Sir, I've asked myself that question every day, and I have no good answer." After that, I was on patrol through the rice paddies in South Vietnam, came home, and frankly, I'm still well aware that 58,000 plus brethren did not. I finished my legal education proudly here, went into private practice, and later served as an assistant district attorney. When I decided to run for Congress in Erie, Pennsylvania, people weren't quite sure what to make of me. By the way, I won my first race by 729 votes out of 160,000 were cast. So don't ever think your vote doesn't make a difference. And make sure you do, and make sure everybody around you do. Voting is not a privilege in this country. It's a responsibility, and we ought to accept it as that. My mother was a Republican. My dad was a Democrat. Interesting political conversations. We learned early on, at least I did from the conversations, that neither party has the wisdom of Solomon nor the prescience of an oracle. And I also learned in my experience in Washington that we're best when we collaborate and get things done together. Then I ran for governor. The day after I announced, I remember Erie, PA is tucked up in the little chimney of this beautiful state. A Philadelphia reporter observed, I was the guy that nobody ever heard of from the city that nobody had ever been to. Quite an embrace politically, wasn't it? Well, your grandparents, I know you got an age differential in this graduating class, but some of your grandparents may tell you when I became governor, I had a beautiful and a very young family. The kids were just munchkins then at the time. Then your parents would say to you, so what? When he became secretary of DHS, he made it so we all have to take our shoes off at the airport. My apologies. Maybe some of you, if you stayed up late when you were younger, and you probably did, will remember me as the guy that actor Darrell Hammond impersonated on Saturday Night Live when he spoofed the color-coded threat warning system we developed with my friends. You know, code chartreuse, code fuchsia. By the way, as a quick sidebar, it helps to have a sense of humor if you get into government and political service, public service. Considering the many positions I've held throughout my life, you might conclude Ridge can't hold a job. That might be true, but along the way, I have enjoyed a sense of mission and fulfillment with every one of my pursuits. I've been blessed to live a unique life of service to community and to country. It's brought me immeasurable emotional and intellectual satisfaction that I could never have imagined on my own at that commencement years ago. And I am grateful today that my younger self for being willing to give those opportunities and a try to take those chances. Each position had its ups and downs. I have been shot at, politicized, roasted, toasted, honored, and harangued. And even not too long ago, tweeted about by a president of the United States. I wouldn't change a minute of any of it. Because with each step on the ground in Vietnam, with each day in court advocating for defendant or client, with every daily meeting with the President of the United States in our collective effort to combat terrorism, I personally experienced the fulfillment that comes from serving a cause greater than self. And when I think of those words, a cause greater than self, I immediately think of a dear friend of mine I lost last August, the treasured public servant, the late Senator John McCain. I was honored to be a pallbearer at the National Cathedral service celebrating his life. John and I became fast friends in 1982. We were the first of a few Vietnam veterans to enter Congress. I was Army, he was Navy. I was tall, he was short. He was an officer, I was an enlisted man. He was a hero, and I was one of his many admirers. We learned the ways of Washington together. We laughed at everything. Sometimes we just talk at length about the latest conflict at home or abroad and how to fix it. You rarely left an encounter with my friend without discussing, if not one, maybe 10 ways as to how we can make our country better. I miss him greatly. There's a lot we could be talking about today, I assure you, laughing about some, and much that we could be talking about at length. In his final letter to the American people, John said, to be connected to America's causes, and you've studied them, liberty, equal justice, and respect for the dignity of all people, that connection brings happiness more sublime than life's fleeting pleasures. Our identities and sense of worth are not circumscribed, but enlarged by serving good causes bigger than ourselves. Of course, John was the model for that. He was the young Navy lieutenant who, after a year of torture in a POW prison, was offered his release. He said, I'm not going until everybody else that's been here longer than I have go with me. They said no, and he said, I'm not going. He was courageous in war, but also in politics, standing up to a supporter's hate, which was targeting then-candidate Barack Obama during the 2008 presidential campaign. He demonstrated how to be decent and, when appropriate, nonpartisan when he spoke in his concession speech about the importance of healing and the importance of unity. John stood up for causes and country in many ways that no one else would or could. At great political and personal cost at times, as you remember, and I remember him fondly from time to time, maverick. Pretty proud of it. And one of his most notable speeches as the nominee for his party, and I was blessed to introduce him at that convention, he closed his remarks with his voice exulting in his love for his country in full sway. I'm going to quote, "Fight with me. Fight for what's right for our country. Fight for the ideals and the character of a free people. Fight for our children's future. Fight for justice and opportunity for all. Stand up to defend our country from our enemies. Stand up for each other, for beautiful, blessed, and bountiful America. Stand up, and fight." Aviator, senator, statesman, symbol, that's a pretty powerful message. Get a chance, stand up and fight. In both our military and public service careers, John and I were asked to stand up for causes greater than ourselves many times, and with that, to take an oath of office. Similar, by the way, to the one you will take when you're admitted to the bars of your respective states. My first one went something like this: I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, etc. I've taken a similar oath 4 additional times during my public service career. The first one just happened to be as I was inducted in the Army. You may raise your hand to take that oath but once in your lifetime, but it will be no less important than any other hand raised by any other person in any other time in our history. And with that pledge to support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state in which you seek admission, you become the embodiment of the law, liberty's guardian. You become the protector of freedom and justice. And you will have your work cut out for you. Your mission, in my opinion, is more complicated and demanding today than ever before, given the social and political environment within which we all now live and work. Just look around. The constitutional questions that scroll across the digital screens or the headlines in the newspaper. Should the Supreme Court be expanded? Should the Electoral College be abandoned? Are the legislative and judicial branches of the government co-equal or subservient to the executive branch? Is the press really the enemy of the people? Is the Attorney General the President's counsel, or is he ours? Can a citizen's privacy be surrendered for security purposes? Can it be invaded by the private sector for commercial benefit and profit? Can social media companies censor hate speech? The list is as long as your role as professionals is critical. Excuse me. And there are no easy answers. Let's just quickly take one of those issues. Privacy in the digital age. The challenge, what I call the digital forevermore. The digital sun's never going to set, ladies and gentlemen. It's just going to get hotter. Our digital DNA is scattered throughout this hyper-connected ecosystem and available for potential abuse by both governments and the private sector. In the world of identity politics and identity consumerism, are you subject to unsolicited opinions or influences? Are you aware of them? Are you making the choice, or are others doing it for you? Or at a minimum, these influences moving you in a particular direction. Now, you and I both know the Constitution does not identify and protect a specific right of privacy. However, the penumbra of privacy has been identified by the courts and is embedded in the Bill of Rights and innumerable constitutional amendments. We all must be vigilant of the erosion of this right under the false pretense of combating crime or combating terrorism or the appeal of commercial convenience. We all have to be mindful that actors, some well-intentioned, some rogue, and some nefarious, can sabotage our democratic principles and institutions, and we know that some already have. My point being is that there are ethical and legal considerations that are developing from the sweeping technological change today, and more will surely follow. You may not be called upon to litigate it or any of these related issues, but remember, as a defender of the rule of law, you will always have standing in the court of public opinion. And so I urge you to speak out when appropriate. Now, more than that, from time to time, I may even urge you to speak out when it doesn't seem to be appropriate at all. Protecting the Constitution from assault, no matter the source, is more important than the candidacy of any individual or the success of any political party. So please, stand up and fight against those who seek to undermine the protection and freedoms of our Constitution as a means to secure office or political favor. You have the tools of a premier education. You know rightness and wrongness. And hopefully you will have the courage of your convictions to do what is right and to face the blowback when it comes. To say in these uncomfortable, sometimes unpopular, sometimes lonely moments, this isn't the law. This isn't right. This isn't consistent with our value system. This isn't who we are. The world over, there are communities and countries, repressions and oppressions, the violated and the vulnerable, that cry out for your advocacy, your guardianship, and your protection. Doing so may involve speaking some hard truth to people in power, to a boss, to a court, even to a commander-in-chief. I'd like to think that that won't stop you. That even if things seem difficult, heart-wrenching, and maybe even a touch perilous, you'll stand up and you'll fight anyway, as others have. You know, the majority of the delegates to the Constitutional Convention were lawyers. 2 of the 3 authors of the Federalist Papers were lawyers. Your moment to take a stand won't take quite the same shape as that. But in its own way, it can be defining of you and historic in a very real sense. Maybe your moment to take a stand won't be like that of the prosecutors at the Nuremberg trial, or like those who were able to shine a bright light on the horror of My Lai massacre. But maybe, and I think it will, take just as much courage. Maybe you won't be the next Aaron Brockovich and beat back a rogue chemical company, but maybe your work will be just as life-saving and as significant. There are lawyers fighting every day so that it's safe in this country to drive while being a black person. Maybe while they're championing that important issue, you're advocating for one that will also combat discrimination in whatever form it takes. And maybe, as some lawyers head to the southern border to reunite migrant children with their parents or support asylum appeals, the stand you will take will look a little different, but it will be just as compassionate and just as urgent. Your path doesn't have to look like my path or anybody else's. There are causes out there for you. There are people out there that will need you, and a Constitution that will continue to depend upon you for its protection. I can hear my friend John McCain now. He believed in this country, and if he was here, and I'll say it for him, he'd believe in you, in the goodness of America, for which we all from time to time, particularly as lawyers, must be prepared to stand up and fight. I know you will. And I might just add, as we keep up this good fight for this great country and for a broader world, may we do so with respect and with dignity. And I might add, with civility. If you ever need a template that speaks to the power of respectful dissent, something grossly and horribly absent these days, everywhere, it seems to me, you will find it in the extraordinary relationship between Supreme Court Justices Antonin Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. One was a conservative and loved his cigars. The other is considered liberal, and to this day, age 86, still plugs along with a strong voice and strong opinions. Did you know they vacationed together? They went to the opera together? Think about that. It's impossible to find a wider philosophical divide than between the late Justice Scalia and the notorious RBG. Look at their powerful and their provocative opinions, yet their deep and abiding respect for the intellectual rigor of their arguments made possible their extraordinary personal friendship and true affection for one another. Such should be the model of comportment and dissent in the many worlds of advocacy today. Disagreement does not have to invite personal attacks. Standing up for what you believe in doesn't have to come at personal harm or denigration of others. If it does, any success you might think you enjoy will ultimately, I think, be pretty hard for you to bear. Decades ago, I learned that there is a difference between success and fulfillment. The lesson was revealed most profoundly to me by my father's example. He aspired to be a lawyer, but personal circumstances, mostly financial, and a firstborn son who ate a lot as a kid, me, kept him from realizing that goal after his service in the Navy in World War II. My dad worked 2 jobs all his life, never took a vacation, never had a new car, spent 30 years paying off a mortgage on a tiny home. He rejected several job offers and promotions because it would have required him to leave the town where he thought it was best for him to raise his kids. 3 children, all who earned graduate degrees, and 2 of them happily JDs. He lived ever so modestly with a loving and supportive wife. So if the barometer of success is material comfort, his readings were pretty low. But I like to think my dad passed both proud and fulfilled. I wish all of you great material success. And frankly, with this education, I think you can find it. But I also wish you true fulfillment through a life in service to a cause greater than yourself, by taking your education, your experience, and your judgment and making it available to others. And if this sounds like one of those go out and save the world speeches, well, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? That's what I think most of you want to do anyhow, at least saving part of it. I want you to do that too. I want you to start here at Dickinson and let time and purpose and passion write your personal story. And may that story be held out in future years as example to follow in the legal profession, as a member of a loving family, and as a community-minded citizen. I want you to have confidence in yourselves and enjoy a life of fulfillment, great happiness, and much love. You have chosen a profession that is designed, it's designed to make a difference in the lives of others. So go for it. Take a stand. Fight for the ideals and character of a free people. Fight for justice and opportunity for everybody. Stand up for each other. Stand up for yourself. Stand up for what's right. Stand up. Stand up and fight. I'm excited for you, and I wish you all the very, very best. Congratulations.